Trump says America should move on from Epstein. It may not be that easy. When former President Donald Trump suggested that America should move on from the Jeffrey Epstein saga, the remark landed with a familiar thud in the national conversation. For some supporters, it sounded like a call to refocus on inflation, immigration, crime, and foreign policy. For critics, it felt like an attempt to close the door on one of the most disturbing and unresolved scandals in modern American history. Years after Epstein's arrest, death, and the unraveling of his vast web of connections, the case continues to haunt the political, legal, and cultural landscape of the United States. And despite Trump's insistence that the country should leave it behind, the Epstein story refuses to fade, because too many questions remain unanswered, too many powerful figures remain untouched, and too many victims are still seeking justice. A scandal that refuses to stay buried. Jeffrey Epstein was not just another wealthy criminal. He was a well-connected financier who moved effortlessly among political elites, royalty, celebrities, and business leaders. His private jets, luxury properties, and exclusive social circles symbolized a level of access that few Americans ever achieve. When Epstein was arrested in 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges, the case exploded far beyond the courtroom. It exposed systemic failures in law enforcement, raised questions about preferential treatment for the powerful, and reignited public anger over a 2008 plea deal that allowed Epstein to avoid serious prison time despite credible allegations of sexual abuse involving minors. His death in a federal jail cell later that year, officially ruled a suicide, only deepened public suspicion. The malfunctioning cameras, alleged guard negligence, and timing of his death fueled conspiracy theories across the political spectrum. For many Americans, Epstein's death felt less like closure and more like the beginning of an even darker chapter. Trump's call to move on. Donald Trump's comments urging the nation to move past Epstein come amid renewed public interest in the case. Court filings, unsealed documents, and civil lawsuits have periodically resurfaced names, associations, and allegations that keep Epstein in the headlines. Trump has attempted to distance himself from Epstein, emphasizing that he severed ties with him long before Epstein's legal troubles became public. While photographs and past comments show that the two men moved in overlapping social circles in the 1990s and early 2000s, as did many wealthy New Yorkers at the time, Trump has consistently denied any wrongdoing or close relationship. Still, his call to move on has been interpreted by critics as part of a broader pattern, minimizing scandals involving elite networks while redirecting attention toward partisan political battles. To them, the issue isn't about Trump personally, it's about accountability in a system that appears to protect the powerful. Why the Epstein case still matters. The reason Epstein remains relevant is simple: justice feels incomplete. While Epstein is dead, many of those who allegedly enabled, ignored, or benefited from his activities have never faced serious consequences. Victims have repeatedly stated that Epstein did not act alone, that he relied on recruiters, facilitators, and powerful connections to maintain his operation. Civil cases against Epstein's associates have provided some financial compensation to victims, but financial settlements are not the same as public accountability. For many Americans, the idea that wealthy elites can quietly settle lawsuits while avoiding criminal scrutiny reinforces a deep mistrust in institutions. This mistrust transcends party lines. Conservatives view the Epstein saga as evidence of a corrupt global elite protected by the establishment. Progressives see it as a glaring example of how wealth and influence shield abusers from justice. In a polarized nation, Epstein is one of the rare issues that unites public outrage, even if interpretations differ. The political risks of moving on. Trump's suggestion to move on may be politically risky, especially in an era where distrust of elites runs high. His own political brand has long been built on challenging establishment power and exposing corruption. Asking voters to let go of Epstein can appear inconsistent with that image. Moreover, the Epstein case has become symbolic. It represents more than one man's crimes. It symbolizes secrecy, privilege, and institutional failure. Telling the public to forget it can sound like telling them to accept a system that never fully held itself accountable. For voters who already believe that justice operates differently for the rich and powerful, such comments may reinforce cynicism rather than bring closure. Media, memory, and the internet age. Another reason America cannot easily move on is the modern media environment. In the digital age, nothing truly disappears. Court documents are archived, interviews are clipped and reshared, and social media ensures that old stories resurface whenever new information emerges. Each time Epstein's name reappears, whether through newly unsealed records, a documentary, or a lawsuit, public anger reignites. The case has become a permanent reference point in discussions about elite misconduct, government transparency, and systemic injustice. Unlike past scandals that faded over time, Epstein exists in an era of permanent memory. The internet does not forget, and neither do the victims. The victim's perspective. Perhaps the most compelling reason America cannot move on is the voices of those Epstein harmed. For survivors of abuse, the case is not a political talking point, it is a lived trauma. Many victims have spoken publicly about the lifelong consequences of Epstein's actions and the pain of watching powerful figures walk away unscathed. To them, calls to move on feel dismissive, as if closure is being demanded before justice has been fully served. True closure, they argue, would require transparency, accountability, and a serious examination of how Epstein was allowed to operate for so long. Accountability versus fatigue. There is no denying that Epstein fatigue exists. Years of speculation, conspiracy theories, and sensational coverage have exhausted some Americans. Many genuinely want to focus on pressing issues like the economy, border security, healthcare, and global conflicts. But fatigue does not equal resolution. History shows that unresolved scandals have a way of resurfacing. Watergate, Iran-Contra, and the financial crisis all lingered long after public officials urged the nation to move forward. Epstein fits that pattern, with the added weight of crimes involving vulnerable minors and systemic abuse. Why moving on requires answers. If America is ever to truly move on from Epstein, it will require more than political statements. It will require transparent investigations into institutional failures, accountability for anyone who knowingly enabled abuse, a continued support and recognition for victims, clear reforms to prevent similar abuses of power. Without these steps, calls to move on sound premature, and, to many, deeply unsatisfying. Conclusion: a nation still waiting. Donald Trump may believe that America should move on from Jeffrey Epstein, but the country's collective conscience is not ready. The Epstein case sits at the intersection of power, privilege, abuse, and justice, issues that define much of today's political and cultural unrest. Until the unanswered questions are addressed and accountability feels real rather than symbolic, Epstein will remain a shadow over American public life. Not because the public enjoys dwelling on the scandal, but because moving on without justice feels like surrender. And for a nation already struggling with trust, surrender is not an option many are willing to accept.